Good morning. So today I'm going to touch on the subject of the COVID vaccine and being a federal inmate. Now, I'm not judging what anybody else wants to do with their body. I am very much on every level of my body, my choice advocate. I don't think the government has any right to infringe upon your rights, to your body. And, particularly not when it comes to trying to mandate a vaccine that isn't really a vaccine. I mean, think about the polio, the chickenpox vaccines. You get the vaccine as a kid, and then you just don't get the disease. You get the COVID vaccine, there's a good chance you're still going to get the disease. And also, with or without the vaccine, a lot of people get it and are asymptomatic. If you get the vaccine, you're certainly not someone who can no longer get the disease. You're certainly not someone who can't pass the disease. And there's no guarantee that you even have less symptoms. In fact, there is a pretty healthy risk, which our media doesn't cover very much, of, you getting the vaccine, and depending on, your actual health situation prior to that, and even some healthy people, you having complications. There are people that have died, people that have lost their ability to walk, those kind of things. And so for me, I feel like the safer bet in general is to not get the vaccine. That's what I'm preferring to go with. However, a lot of lines of work are now mandating it. They're saying, hey, you either get the vaccine or you ain't got a job. And a lot of people, which I'm fully impressed, are standing their ground. And a lot of these people are medical professionals who would rather lose their job than get the vaccine. And these are people that are working with vaccinated and unvaccinated people in scenarios every day. And you have a lot of doctors making videos that are going viral discussing why they would never get the vaccine. They would rather lose their job, move out of the country, do whatever they got to do to get the heck away from it. And because really it's not a vaccine, it's an experimental drug. And, and only one version of which has been approved by the FDA. And that approval was fast-tracked, meaning a lot of the typical steps that have to be gone through for a vaccine to get FDA approval were completely skipped or pushed aside or disregarded, which means that it's not really, I mean, by no real definition is it a vaccine, other than the fact that it's kind of like me if I was a baseball coach of some minor league team, or some recreational team, that I give you a t-shirt and a certificate that says you now play for the major leagues. Do you really play for the major leagues? Do you really have major league ability necessarily? No, not at all, But so anyway, and and I know not everyone agrees with this, and that's okay. The fact that we have, almost a non-existent flu numbers during flu season, but super high COVID numbers. I feel like a lot of the numbers are cooked. I feel like there's a lot of foolery going on. I feel like there's a lot of nonsense. I feel like, is COVID real? Absolutely. Can you really get it? Yes. Can it make you sick? Yes. Are there a handful of people that die from it? Absolutely. Just like literally every other viral infection we have. MRSA, for example, which is a skin infection. Pneumonia, the flu, whatever. So anyway, and if you feel differently, that's okay. I'm not undermining your position or your perspective. I'm not disregarding it. I'm not belittling it or invalidating it. I'm simply stating my position, for what it is, some random stranger on the interweb. So I say all that to say, I've been hearing a lot of buzz from federal inmates I'm in contact with, from, support groups for people that are federal, that have loved ones in the federal system or recently came out of the federal system, that a lot of federal prisons are doing what a lot of states are doing, and they're incentivizing the vaccine. They're saying, all vaccinated people, one day a month get to stay up 2 hours later. One day a month, we'll give out free popcorn, a little bag of popcorn, to all the vaccinated people. Or we'll have a movie night once a month for vaccinated people. And even though the idea of a little bag of popcorn that you and I could probably get for free at some stores, or, staying up 2 hours later, heck, staying up 2 hours later sounds like a punishment to me because I love bedtime. Or, getting to watch a movie, even though to you and I, these seem like very small incentives that wouldn't really persuade folks, you got to understand a person who's incarcerated, the level of stress and duress, and how much their world has been shrunk down, how little joy and excitement and variety that exists in their lives. These are huge incentives. These aren't small things. These are big things. So you got to really be able to kind of assess the incentive, value from the perspective of an inmate. And from that perspective, I can see where these incentives would be pretty bulky incentives. And some federal prisons, and some state prisons, but we're fed people here. Some federal prisons are starting to mandate that a certain percentage of the employees be vaccinated, that a certain percentage of the inmate population be vaccinated. Now, of course, they're trying to keep these numbers on board, with the ever-raising standards of percentages by incentivizing the inmates. And in case of the staff, you're looking at losing your job, which is something that's a very daunting thing to a lot of folks, particularly if, let's say you're part of a union, or let's say that you've been at this job for a period of time and you're on a pretty healthy pay grade, or let's say, your benefit package fully matures next month, or your 401k. Are you gonna let that job go to just not get poked and get an experimental drug injected into your arm? I don't know. And I don't knock anybody for their decision one way or the other. However, what I do know, what I foresee as a very, very high probability, is once the majority of the inmate population is vaccinated through these incentives that they're throwing out, and once they start punishing people for not getting the vaccines, for not being compliant, that not long after that, there will be a circumstance where it is just required of all federal inmates to be fully vaccinated. And so when I get sentenced, and what are we at now? 23 days, I think, 24 days, something like that. When I get sentenced, I should have roughly a month, before I have to self-surrender to my parent institution. If the judge decides to send me to prison, hopefully he'll let me do whatever prison time I'm sentenced to on home confinement, or maybe I'll really be blessed and get probation. But again, this is a whole lot of lottery ticket level wishes there. But if I find out that I got to go to prison, I'm just going to get the vaccine before I go in. I'm going to get documentation. I'm going to give documentation to my primary care physician. I'm going to give documentation, copies of it, to my point of contact person in the free world to mail in. I'm going to take copies with me when I self-surrender. I'm going to make sure that the documentation, whether they need to get it from my doctor, whether they can accept it from me, whether it needs to just come from the outside world, that it's fully available. And I'm a hope, because in the Fed, they do what they want with you. It's like being in the military. Your body, your life is not yours. It's theirs to use and do what they want at their discretion, pretty much. Because everyone who's dealt with the Feds know the Feds do what they want. You know what I mean? That's just a known fact, in general. And just hope that the Feds don't say, well, you got a vaccine in the free world, but you got to have our vaccine while you're incarcerated, the one we chose for you, in order to be considered part of the vaccinated population. And the reason why I would get the vaccine while I'm in the free world is in case I have any type of reaction or nasty side effects or whatever, I can actually get medical care still. Once you get in the Fed, if you have some nasty reaction, more often than not, the only medical care you can expect is, a trip to medical, which God knows how long you're going to wait for that, and somebody to tell you, go order ibuprofen off the commissary and take those. Go spend your money, pay an insane markup price for some nonsense ibuprofen and treat your symptoms with that. Here in the free world, plus, if you get the vaccine while you're incarcerated, I've seen a lot of people struggle to get medical records from corrections facilities, particularly federal. Just like a lot of people struggle when they get out of the military to get their medical records. I want documentation of what was done to me or what I did, because I may need that in the future for some reason. And I don't want to not have access to necessary documentation because of the fact that I did something, I opted to do something that was unavoidable in prison versus in the free world. Personally, the prison population is a great test subject population because it's very controlled. And when they get out of prison, there's still a period of usually years of monitoring. So it's a great control group for any experimental drug. And I don't say that encouraging, the mandate of inmates being vaccinated, but I say that from the perspective of, I could see why Big Pharma and the government, who's in bed with Big Pharma, would strongly push for mandatory inmate vaccinations. I don't like it. I feel like it infringes upon my rights. I feel like, and that's with anybody, if you're being mandated to get it for your job or for travel, I feel like it's an infringement of your rights. I feel like I just don't like it. I just overall don't like it. I have a bad feeling about it. And being a person with a laundry list of pre-existing medical conditions, it certainly puts me very much on edge. But having said that, when I get sentenced, which you'll find out, shortly after I do, what that's going to be. If my sentence is home confinement or probation or a combination of the two, I will not be getting the vaccine until eventually those of us in the free world are forced to as well. But then again, if they make it, requirement for all inmates, who's to say it's not eventually going to become a requirement for all people under federal supervision of some sort? Hopefully, if that's the case, I would be off supervision before that becomes the situation. But I may not. We don't know. But if I find out that I have to go to prison, I'm definitely just going to get my vaccine, get that mess out the way while I'm in the free world, get lots of documentation, take a copy in with me, have my point of contact person on the outside have 1 or 2 copies on hand, and make sure my doctor, my physician has a copy, because they may say, well, we need documentation from a physician. If I get this shot or these shots at a random clinic or, the Med Express or a community event, it may be hard to track down a doctor to verify that. But if I get them anywhere and I give the documentation to my primary care physician, then I will have confirmation from my primary care physician that I did, in fact, get the vaccine. I just hope that they wouldn't make me, double down. I get maybe the J&J one out here and have to get the Pfizer in there or something. Because I definitely feel like there's a much larger risk for adverse effects with anything when you have to get multiple versions of something. You know what I mean? So that's my take on it. I know there are plenty of people on here who are probably, pro, experimental drugs. It's not a real vaccine. Let's just call it what it is, experimental drug. Pro-experimental drug. There are a lot of people who are anti-experimental drugs, particularly those things being mandated. And, I'm not knocking anybody for their position. I will say, though, if your sources of information are the American media or, people that are getting some kind of kickback from the government, potentially to cook numbers or skew numbers or misinform, I don't consider you as a person who has valid information sources. I consider you a person who has misinformation sources. Valid information sources are people firsthand that are working in the medical field. Valid information sources are the firsthand accounts of doctors and medical professionals who talk about what they've seen come out of this, about the risks associated in it, particularly for me, about the refusal to participate in this, to whatever extent they have to go to opt out of the experiment. But firsthand accounts from people that have nothing to gain in any way, shape, or form by the information they're given are generally the most authentic, valid source of information. And when you can get firsthand accounts from multiple parties who have no connection to one another and none of which have anything to gain by the information they're presenting, I think that really validates things. Not to say that, my position or the opposite end of the spectrum can't provide these type of proofs or testimonies, all day, every day, or find them on Google, to back their position. But again, I'm not judging your position. I'm not knocking your decision for your life and your health. But I do feel like I should be entitled to make my own decision. And I do think requiring it of inmates or people in nursing homes or people in who work in the airport, I think this is really, really targeting vulnerable people, and I don't like that. It really bothers me when I feel vulnerable people are being exploited. The nursing home population is a very vulnerable population. The inmate population, because of their lack of choice and rights and option, is a very vulnerable population as far as targeting them in this. People who have jobs and careers that they have worked, years or decades even for, and putting their job on the chopping block makes them a vulnerable group, I don't like that. I don't like that. And one thing that we know historically is whenever you're incentivized to do something, usually it's something that's not in your best interest or something that is certainly not going to be pleasant for you, at some point to some degree. You don't have to incentivize people to go collect their lottery winnings. But you do have to incentivize people to volunteer to do jobs that are beneath their pay grade or potentially hazardous. So the fact that in the free world, incentives are being largely, ultimatums are being used, obviously, but incentivizing, most states are incentivizing this. They're using incentives. They're kind of dangling a carrot in front of you to get you to go along. That concerns me greatly. It deeply concerns me that we're being incentivized, because for me, that's a huge red flag. Ginormous. So anyway, let me know what you think about it. That's just my opinion and my position. And stay safe, stay healthy to the best of your ability, however you choose to go about doing that. And good day. God bless.